Hi, this is Carol Harnett with a one-take Work.Love.Play.Daily video blog, and this post is a continuing discussion on my benefits column for HR Executive, which is up now, called Selling the Problem of Absence. And I need to say for FCC regs that HR Executive hires and pays me to write that column, but they do not require me to do this blog post, nor do they influence it in any way. Cherie King asked me if I would do a blog post on whether vocational rehab counselors make a difference on the outcomes of disability claims. I'm happy to do that. Cherie, just so you know, is a vocational rehab counselor. She worked in the disability industry, then consulted to it, then went back to school and got her doctorate, and now is a professor teaching on the topic. And I hope to get her on film one of these days soon, talking about the topic more and getting it up on this post. But in lieu of that, I'll give you my experience in the last 14 years. So when I joined the industry, vocational rehab counselors were essentially used almost exclusively on long-term disability, and they would interact with our employees, our out-of-work employees or claimants, and specifically on return to work. Now, when they were usually interacting with them, initially at least, they were almost always having discussions about getting them into a new job or working for a new employer or both. And they might help with what's called change in definition, which means that the person is moving from a definition of disability, which happens about around the 2-year mark, can happen in the 1-year mark, it depends on the contract. But again, a change in definition of disability that went from disabled from your own occupation to any occupation, and not as restrictive a definition of Social Security disability, which is any and all occupations, but it's any reasonable occupation. And so they would do things like either themselves or they would vend out and then monitor telephonically things like transferable skills analyses and job coaching, resume preparation, and job search. In vocational rehab counseling and in disability claim management in total, you're really following a return to work hierarchy. You're trying ideally to get the person back to their own job at their own employer or a new job at their own employer, followed by, so that would be the second step, followed by the third step is their own job at a new employer or a new job at a new employer. So you want to get them to their employer first or to a new employer second, ideally to their own job, and then obviously finding a new one. About 14 years ago, when I first was in the industry, we did a number of things with Voc Rehab. We actually experimented with moving them on to short-term disability because I talked yesterday about how important time frame is to return to work, it being less about injury or illness and more about the time out of work. And so we said, well, Voc Rehab people are so important in return to work, and by the way, are much better than anybody at accommodation. Shouldn't we have them involved sooner? Because then it would even increase these return to work odds. And they actually did have good impact. I will tell you professionally, they seem to struggle with very early references to them. So for example, a referral that came to them right out of the gate, someone who tore a rotator cuff and has overhead reach, and we ideally wanted them to call the employer and negotiate taking out the overhead reach requirement until the person recovered. They did seem uncomfortable with that, so we removed that from them and got them involved a little later on. And interesting enough, much like the nurses, got them involved at about the 6-week mark, and they were really quite successful. But then something happened. There was a realization from financially that the best thing that you could do with a Voc Rehab counselor was really have them work on the any occupation definition in long-term disability. So this 2-year mark where we're trying to understand if the person can continue on disability benefits under a new definition of disability. And because Voc Rehab counselors better than anybody understand transferable skills, that could be applied to this change of definition. And while they'd always done it, you saw this mass change where Voc Rehab people, maybe 10% of the time, were working on return to work in long-term disability, and then about 90% of the time working on this really technical definition of change of definition of disability. And that probably happened, I would say, anywhere from the last 7 to 10 years, maybe even 5 to 10 years. And now it seems to have moved back to the middle. They seem to be doing about half their time working on change in definition, of course depends on the carrier or the third-party administrator, and then the other half doing return to work. My experience with Voc Rehab people, very, very effective in returning people to work, particularly helping people sort out what they can do next, and then extremely helpful, frankly, in these financial decisions. So that's my perspective. And this is Carol Harnett with a one-take Work, Love, Play Daily video blog saying, I hope you've gotten some great work today that you're enjoying some love and you have made some time for play. Thanks. Bye.